Hello and welcome to First Flight, a Star Trek Enterprise rewatch podcast where we are watching and discussing each episode of Enterprise in succession. First Flight is a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions Network.
This is Commander Tucker of Enterprise. We've got some information you're going to want to hear.
Welcome, Enterprise fans. I'm your co-host, Chris.
And I'm your co-host, Abby.
And tonight we are discussing The Catwalk, the 12th episode of Season 2. The Catwalk had a story by Mike Sussman and Phyllis Strong and was directed by Mike Vehar. It aired on December 18th, 2002. But before we begin our discussion, we need to issue a read alert.
Tactical alert. All hands to stations.
There are potential spoilers ahead. We might end up talking about any part of the series at any time, so you have been warned. And now, for a summary of the episode, it's time for the Captain's Log. So, Abby, let's go.
Captain Starlog Supplemental.
All right, so I don't think I'm quite up to your Dr. Seuss challenge that you've given yourself, but my brain really enjoys haiku. And I know there are other Star Trek podcasts out there that do this as well, and I was inspired by them. So in honor of the many great Trek poets before me, here is my haiku recap of The Catwalk. Deadly storm shelter. Guests cause takeover crisis. Victorious crew.
Oh, I love it. Perfect. I love a haiku too.
I feel like it's the real essence of stuff, but that really doesn't tell anybody at all what this is about. So this is really about the crew having to take shelter on the catwalk, which is part of the nacelle, when a dangerous storm comes by and all the hijinks that ensue.
Yes. So, thank you for that. That was beautiful. And that wasn't ChatGPT. That was you.
That was straight out of my brain. Yep. I have not yet talked to the AI, though my husband is a fan.
I don't know if I'm a fan, but I'm impressed with some of it. Like, I asked it to write a scene of the show Seinfeld as if Jerry and George react to COVID-19. And it was pretty good. It was pretty good. It's mutating, Jerry. It's mutating. Anyway, it's time to deploy our subspace amplifiers and get into this episode. We'll start with a quick chat about the cold open and then head into our pros and decons section. Each of us will share 3 of our favorite parts of the episode, and then if there are things that don't gel with us, we'll have a discussion on any decons from the episode. You might hear a dog bark in this discussion if somebody's Porthos Pick is mentioned, but we'll still discuss them later on.
All right, so let's get into this episode. And as always, we start with the cold open, one of my favorite parts. And this one is a little bit meatier than we get recently. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on how this episode starts?
Yeah, it reminded me of the beginning of Shockwave Part 1. The crew's just super happy to go check out a planet. You're, getting the crew ready to go on a shuttle pod, and it seems like just everyone's happy and excited. And then they can't go, right? So they get this call and that a neutronic wavefront is coming. And, I love that because there's some Voyager connection that I think we'll talk about later. Mm-hmm. So, I just love the whole setup and seeing the crew giddy about doing a planetary survey.
Yeah, my family camps a ton, and I love camping. And when I'm hearing them talk about, the campfire and a cliffside and a ridge, and I'm just like, yeah, that's the perfect evening. And you sit there under the stars, and and then it's just yanked away. And oh man. And I also think, like, there was some cold water thrown on them in this cold open. Hot, try there.
Mm.
When they have this mysterious call, they get warned about the storm, and they're like, "Just go to warp 7 when we get on board." And they're like,
Wah, wah,
"Right,
wah.
exactly." Like you could see that everything just kind of changed right in that moment because it wasn't, "Oh, we can save you from this." It's, "Oh, we're in this with you," and that was a really interesting kind of note to end it on there. I'm going to have more to say about where commercials and things coming in this episode, but I think that was a really nice cut because it took it from, like you said, this happy kind of positive open, "Oh, this is going to be one of those uplifting ones of Trek where they go on a planet and everything's pretty and there's a little mystery," and "Oh no, it's not." Never mind. And I like that reversal. I mean, and it was just a couple minutes and we had that little flip. Good way to start.
Yeah, it was. I was smiling from the beginning. So, shall we get into our pros?
Let's do it.
All right, so I'll go first. And man, this was a really hard one to cut my list down to 3 pros.
No
Um,
kidding.
gosh, I love this episode. So some of my cuts happened because I'm like, well, I hope Abby will cover this part. So, I'm going to start with, they didn't get to go to the beautiful planet, which would have been really cool. But we did get the beauty of the neutronic wavefront. And I love that scene when Archer is looking out his ready womb. Ready womb? What am I, Elmer Fudd? Oh,
Either that or you've got some news to share.
No.
Yeah.
We have a girl, we have a boy, we're done. All right.
Yeah,
So
we're done.
looking at his visual effects are just stunning of that wavefront. And I loved just that moment where we're seeing the beauty of space as nature, even if it's powerful and destructive, like a storm on the horizon. There's something still beautiful and impressive about it. And I just love how it captured that. And the show gave a moment to capture Archer's awe. Because that's Star Trek, right? Like these people leave the planet Earth to put themselves in danger to see this kind of stuff. So I appreciate when Star Trek actually pauses the drama and the action and just gives those moments of awe. So that was the first part of that one, but I'll let you respond to that first part.
Well, what it makes me think of every single time is I live in the upper Midwest and we storm watch here like all the time. Probably in times when we maybe shouldn't because you never know. And we have a great big front porch swing and my girls, my husband and I will get on there under a blanket and we'll just watch the storm come through. And that's what I felt with Archer. Like he's just watching it and he knows, this, I probably shouldn't be right here right now. I should probably be getting going. This looks like a big one. And you have that like nervous, but it's also excitement and it is awe. It's that connection to something bigger. Like, and but it's not in a way that makes you feel small. It's in a way that makes you feel kind of connected. Like things around you are happening and you're just going with it. And that's such a neat feeling. And I also really appreciate the way that Scott Bakula plays this when his voice when he says, "I didn't expect it to be beautiful," is so raw.
Yeah.
And that moment transitions them into what I'm guessing is probably the second part of this pro.
Well, so this pro is mostly about the visual effects of the episode, and that's the first one that really stuck out with me. The second one was when Enterprise enters the wave. It's just so awesome because Enterprise is so small and it's moving in a dynamic way, and the wavefront is so muscular, like and just amazing looking. And so I really appreciated that. And that's not a thing we would get in that caliber in previous Trek. So I appreciated that VFX. And then I loved the pull out from the window with Trip.
Oh, yes.
As they're in the storm and we see the alien ship docked. We don't get a lot of those pullouts. The most notable one to me is Tuvok at the end of the gift when he's meditating
Oh,
the pull out of the side of
yes.
Voyager. Oh, what a great moment. And this is great too. It gives scale to Enterprise. There's a realism there. So great visual effects there. And then the last one is Enterprise arcing toward the plasma eddy with an alien ship attached to it. Really cool looking, just dynamic. It really, Enterprise seems really agile and just alive. And everything about the visual effects in this episode were top notch.
Yeah, I have on my notes, two ship shots are gorgeous. And
Mm.
then in parentheses, multiple times over.
Hmm.
Because yeah, this is visual effects that really stands up 20 years later. And that is so neat to see. And it reminds you that as much as we personally seem to always want to go back to Trek for the heart of it, there are some people that go for the pretty,
Mm.
and ooh, this still does pretty. And even up until now, when people are talking about the effects in Discovery and in Strange New Worlds, Trek always pushes those boundaries, and this is one of those times where you can see them doing it, and it does hold up. And so, props to all those behind the scenes people who don't always get as much attention as they deserve, because yeah, this is a really beautiful episode.
Yeah, like modern Trek sometimes is too pretty. Like sometimes there's too many nebulas making everything purple and blue in the background everywhere. Right, it's space, so they shouldn't see a bunch. So I appreciate like remastered TNG when like things just look like standard, like in Half a Life when they're trying to restart that
Yeah.
star. It just looks normal and not over the top. I appreciate that. But this episode really does a good job because it's about them being swallowed up by the colors, right, of this particular phenomenon. So, yeah, the VFX and the ships were just stunning in this episode, and I had to call it out. That's my first pro. So that was a long pick for me. What's your pick?
It's all right. There was a lot of good stuff to talk about in there. My first pick is literally practical because I love Travis and Trip walking down to the catwalk for the first time and
Yes.
having this whole discussion about how are things going to work? Where are we going to put this? How are we going to hook this up? And because these are the exact two people who need to be doing this. The person who's been through it, who's lived through all of the boomer life and has had to shelter in place for stuff and is going to think about things like a latrine, thank God. But then,
Not a shower,
you've
though.
got Trip who's yeah, that scene is so everybody when they've been camping for too long without any running water. I love it. But I like how they're going through and they're both thinking about all these things they're going to have to do, and they're thinking about them quickly. They're building off of each other. They're doing what they can do immediately, and because they know they have a timeline, the clock is ticking, and they're going to go in and do as much as they can in the quickest amount of time possible. And that kind of back and forth between them is something we don't see as much as the seasons go on, and I really like it. Like, it's a neat dynamic between Travis and Trip that you don't get often enough, but it's very easy. They're both so charismatic, they're both so natural. They play very well together, and I really enjoyed that part of this episode.
I think this is a first for us that we have the same exact pick. This is my second pick.
We need some sort of special sound effect for that.
It's not Defiant Torpedoes. We'll find our own.
Well, this is where we're going to insert here awesome sound.
Oh man, a copy of me got transported out? Boo. I'm the transporter clone? Boo.
The distortion field must have... Oh, I've heard this tune before.
Yeah. So yes, this is my second pro. And so I'll just say I love the same practical discussion that they're having. And this is again picking up where we left off in the communicator when they're working on the Suliban pod and just being comfortable, like you said, together. It's almost like Trip's the slightly older brother and Travis is the slightly younger brother, and they're just chill with each other. They're really good together. But really what got me in this moment was Travis's backstory and
Yeah.
the emotional moment we get to have for Travis. Like, he actually gets something, right?
Yeah.
He says, and I like the line. It's so
Yeah.
we don't need much more, but that's enough. Like, give us these little nuggets every couple episodes, and we're gonna flesh them out more. So I really appreciate this scene. And when I was making my choices with the pros, I was like, I gotta keep the Travis one because we've been calling for more Travis, and we got it here. So that is my second pro. We're moving along here. So what's your second pro?
We are. All right, so I want to talk about the back half of this episode for a little bit, where we find out that there are aliens who are immune to this radiation that our crew has to hide from. And they're coming to try to take over Enterprise. And oh, guess what? Those people you picked up are actually refugees from them, maybe? I mean, I think by the end we believe their story, but they never really confirm anything other than those guys trying to take over the ships are jerks. And but that's okay. That's okay because this alien captain, who never is even named in this episode, right? He doesn't have a name. He's just the alien captain. That's how he's listed. Is so good. Like, this is the kind of villain that's just like, people describe it as delicious. He's got the voice, he's got the demeanor, he's got kind of that whole like evil charisma. It's just oozing for him. And this is the actor Danny Goldring, and he's in a bunch of other Star Trek stuff too, that as soon as I call it out, you're going to know the voice and you're going to go, oh yeah. And I just love what he did in this one with all of it. Like, I love how he doesn't give much away about himself, but you learn quickly that he's learning about them. And how interesting to see somebody who comes onto a ship and figures it out. Like, that's interesting. He's figuring out where they are, what happened, who they are, and he uses that. And I think that you can see when they're doing the whole plot at the end and tricking him, Archer has that little extra flinch, and he's play acting his big I'm dying out here, but there's a real flinch when this guy says, your father's engine, the first warp 5 ship from Earth. Like, he wasn't expecting this guy to pull that card, and that's what makes him such a delicious villain. So do you want to respond to that, and then we can talk about his other roles real quick? Or
Okay, I'll just say this, and then I can't say too much more without calling out a specific role. But
okay,
I will say that this was the pick I hoped that you made. This was a hard cut. This guy was fantastic, and the voice.
Yeah.
I mean, the voice. And that's all I can say until we call out some of his other roles.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
All right. The other Enterprise one he was the Nausicaan captain in Fortunate Son that we reviewed last season. And as soon as I went, oh yeah, you hear it and you see it, and the voice. Yep. But then he was also in DS9 twice. He was Legate Kell in Civil Defense, which is one of my personal favorite episodes of DS9. He was also Chief Burke in Nor the Battle to the Strong. And that's a very memorable role. And that's the only one where you see him without any prosthetics on. And then the last one, of course, is in Voyager's The Killing Games Part 1 and 2. He's Carr. So
yes, that's
now
the one.
you know.
That's the one I was gonna call out. I mean, I think I've seen that episode so many times. My sister's a history buff, and even as a kid, and we were just enamored with that episode, World War II and stuff. And so I really appreciate his character in that. And what's really interesting is his character in the Catwalk and the Killing Game. They both seize the ship, but doing so, they study the crew, their history. They take the time to really get into them, and you can admire Archer and crew and what they have to offer. Like, that's not going to deter his goals, but it's the very similar character, and I don't think that's lazy writing. I think it's just coincidental. But this guy plays this authoritative, thoughtful villain really, really well.
Yeah, he plays smart evil delectably.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure we gave him and his command of that entire part of the plot some love.
Yeah, he really fills a captain's chair very well. Like,
Uh-huh.
not a lot of people can do that, especially Alien of the Week, Character of the Week, but he does it. It would be really cool if he could have been like an actual Starfleet captain at some point.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He also could have made a really good Admiral.
Oh yeah.
Movie quality Admiral right there. Maybe we'll just wish it into existence.
I'm for it. Let's do it.
All right. So speaking of let's do it, let's move on to your third pro. What do you got for us tonight?
So this is the second half of the episode too, and it's just the tension and the amazing pacing cutting between the different elements of what's going on, between the catwalk heating up and the crew there struggling, Archer's firefight in the galley or the kitchen, and then T'Pol and Reed working and like moving mechanical things and with their hands and making the realism of the ship again come to life, as we've said time and time again. Then the bridge aliens and the captain being pretty tough up there, and then there's VFX with the ships. So like everything, every component, music, everything is working together, making this perfect choreographed dance and cut between all the scenes. Great editing, great performances, the pacing. It's just a perfect compilation of scenes that, like the Doomsday Machine, which is perfectly building tension from various scenes, from the bridge of the Enterprise to the other ship and space shots. Everything is perfectly working together. There's not a moment you could criticize. I think the end of this episode, that second half, is action-packed, character-driven. I can't say more good things about it. It was just, I was really enjoying it. That's all.
That's a really good way to sum this one up, because I feel like there are so many like little moments in this episode, but overall they are really well spread out. Like it's like when you open a frozen pizza and the pepperoni is distributed well and you're like, yes, this is a good pizza, as opposed to the time where it's all like slid onto one side.
Oh jeez.
Ooh, that's a new metaphor. I just made a food metaphor about Enterprise pacing. Of course I did.
I love that.
Anyways. Whew, it's getting late here, people. It's getting late.
We're gonna have to rate future episodes on its pizza pacing.
There we go. The PP of the episode. Oh no. No. All right. Anyways, now that we've just gave ourselves a really good bumper there, I do
that's staying in the body of the episode.
All right. Well, I'm very on brand, that's for sure. One of the things that stands out for me in that last chunk is about how we see Trip here so calm and cool and describing what to do. He's talking through something that he would not have to think about at all. It's instinctual to him, but he has to talk it through to two other people. And he knows about exactly how long things should take. And when they're behind, he's like, everything okay? And they're saying nope. And I liked that moment, which it's such a contrast to some of the other episodes this season where we've seen him not being comfortable in a command situation. And here he was. This was him in his element doing this thing. And that was just a really nice resonance in the middle of all the rest of this. And it turned from a survival movie to a caper movie, kind of about halfway through. And that was just it was seamless, because you didn't realize that this was happening until it was. And you're like, that's very clever. And that's something I remember the first time that I watched this, not having any expectation of it going the way that it went. And I always like that, because when you read and you watch a lot of sci-fi, sometimes you can predict things that others who don't watch or read as much can't. Yeah. And I like it when I get surprised. And this one has that turn, which is a beautifully well done surprise.
Yeah, totally. And the identity and the motive of the three stowaways, that's a good little thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and the plot is not complex. It's pretty
Nope.
simple. And we're made to like suspect that these three are like the advanced party that's letting these other guys on board as a distraction, but they're not that. I tend to believe them in the end that they were deserters. I feel like the episode wants us to take that at face value.
Yeah.
Um, and I like that little twist. It's not the most amazing plotting, but that is not the point. Like, you don't need to have
Right.
these intricate, what's going to happen next plots. You just need a really well done, executed plot with believable characters. And that moment with Trip
Yep.
that you're talking about, I loved it because it was so authentic that he wasn't out there doing it. Because he was already exposed to the radiation.
Yep.
The
Exactly.
plot gave these other characters something to do, and it wasn't forced. There's so
Right.
many episodes of all Star Trek where, wait, why is this person doing this? Oh, because story needed this to happen.
Right.
But it logically needed to happen in this case. So really
Yep.
appreciated that.
For my last one.
I'm ready.
All right. You thought you had a big one before. I have a big one. I enjoy the thread in this episode that is T'Pol interacting one-on-one with various other members of the crew and showing how her relationships with them have progressed since we first started seeing her way back in episode 1.
Oh, this is good.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of them in here. So we've got the whole when Archer and T'Pol have she misremembered that the Vulcan ship did not survive the storm, and they're in the ready room looking at the storm, and we've talked about that a little bit. But she lied, and he knows she lied, but they don't have to say it to each other. Like they just are going to leave it at, "I was trying to comfort you. I was trying to not scare you." Like they both understand the reasoning, and that is so subtle and never would have happened at the beginning of the relationship. So that's so much growth. And it's also growth when later on they have the only slightly chat when they're trying to go to sleep, and first it's Porthos and the water polo, and then it's the pad, and they're back and forthing, and she has that perfect like Vulcan dry answer of, "Perhaps we can sing some songs later." Like, I laugh every time. The delivery on that is so perfect. He doesn't have to order her, but he orders her to fraternize more. And then it works out later, because that beautiful little part at the end where Trip just says, "It was nice to see you here, Sub Commander. It's every Tuesday if you want to come back." And just, he was the perfect person to do that, because it's kind of his thing anyway, and they have that growing relationship. But just to see that part of it, and then there's the beautiful scene with T'Pol and Phlox where he's appealing to her for more space for his animals. And anytime the two of them are on screen together, the episode gets better, because they're just phenomenal actors, and they are phenomenal with each other. And as the two non-humans, they just bring scenes that Enterprise needs to feel whole. And this was one of them. But again, Phlox was really appealing to their relationship where it is now, because he says, "I'm not used to having to do emotional appeals." And he knows he doesn't have to. That's all he had to say, because they've come to the point where she understands that this is that important to him. And it's just nice to see that. It's the same way that Archer walks around and checks on people, but we've seen him kind of do that more. This is big for her, and we see it with different people all throughout. And it's just a really nice thread that connects all the parts of this episode.
Yeah, I really love how you walked us through that. And, I was kind of tracking the T'Pol thing too. But when I was making my notes, I didn't connect with the Phlox T'Pol scene. And I loved that scene. That was one of my pros that I had to cut. Because the irony of him saying that he's not accustomed to making an emotional appeal to a Vulcan, right?
Yeah.
And him knowing that would actually land for her.
Yep.
But he's not making the appeal. He's saying, don't make me make the appeal, which is the appeal itself. So
Exactly.
it's some really great dialogue. It's less is more, right? He could have been
Yep.
begging, and no, it's less is more between these two, kind of kindred souls on the ship because of the aliens, like you said. So yeah, fantastic. I really appreciate that. And I didn't connect the to Paul and Archer scene too in the ready room, where he calls her out on lying, which
Yep.
makes me, when you were saying that, it made me think, because I recently just finished season 1 of Strange New Worlds, when Pike tells La'an to give the crew hope.
Yep.
T'Pol somehow has learned that lesson already. And I don't think season 1 T'Pol early in the season would be giving that false hope.
Absolutely not.
So it's like these huge, pivotal, but subtle signals that the characters are transforming, that I love doing this podcast with you, because this is what we're getting out of it. It's showing that the writing of Enterprise is a lot more nuanced than sometimes we give it credit for. And sometimes it's way not nuanced, like in Precious Cargo.
Well,
but there's these moments.
Yeah. It's intentional writing. They know where they want to kind of go with these characters now, and they're fleshing them out. And I think that about being halfway-ish through this season, I feel like season 2 gets such a bad rap, and maybe it's because a whole bunch of these episodes are character-y. We're getting, and it's not always the character parts that we'd want to get, but we're getting a lot of backstory with people, and sometimes people find that less appealing than big space battles, which I get, but I'm really enjoying it, and I'm really enjoying this deep look too, because I think that I'm seeing nuances I might not have seen before, and I hope that that's helping other people see them too, because Enterprise is such a gem, and more people need to realize that.
When you said that there's more character-y, like with Precious Cargo, it was a Trip episode, and I love Trip. The story that Trip was going through wasn't the best, but I enjoyed getting more time with Trip and his little moments about being in Florida, going to the beach, and then T'Pol with the Seventh and getting that backstory. It could have been done better, but I appreciated those nuggets. So like, it's some of the episodes in the beginning of season 2 are weak and not fully fleshed, fully developed, but they're centered around characters we love nonetheless. And if we can realign our consumption with that in mind, I think we can get more out of these episodes that just don't have the best story, but they have the characters we love. And so, yeah, these character moments, and specifically ones you pulled out with T'Pol, are treasures. And thank you for pulling them out.
Oh, you're welcome. Watching T'Pol is never a hard thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Unless there's sexy time music playing in the background, right? And Chris, in the future, cue sexy time music. Just for
you. That is
you.
going to run through my head every single time I hear that music from now on. It's going to be you in my head.
I have it memorized now because I've had to record it a few times and edit it in. So
I'm sorry.
No, I actually like it now. It makes me laugh. All right. So
that's the thing about inside jokes with podcasts and like stuff like this. Melanie and I have a few of those too, that where you just go back to it and you're just like, yep, never going to not think about that again.
Yep, definitely. So that music is a forever decon for you. But let's go into our decons for this episode. These are the things that just didn't gel with us. So Abby, let's start with you this time.
All right. So I have only a couple things, and the majority of them are just silly little things again. So the first thing, it wouldn't be me if I didn't look at what was going on in the galley while they're having a fight. Like, I'm not watching the phasers, I'm looking at the produce. And so I have to say that knowing Chef is in the catwalk with them and has to feed them all, I would not have thought that he would have left a bowl of what was obviously some sort of squashes and melons and produce out in the middle of the galley. So I'm guessing that these aliens had been there long enough to need a snack, and perhaps
Yeah.
they were herbivores. So I was just like, I can't believe that somebody thought that that was what should be. We know it's the galley without having produce, so that would just made me laugh. It's so Enterprise to just have random weird looking vegetables out in the middle of nowhere where they shouldn't be.
So let me ask you a
So,
question.
yeah.
Because one thing I liked about that firefight scene, that's one of my picks, was
Mhm.
how tactile it was.
Yeah.
More than usual phaser fire scenes, because pans and stuff were being, knocked over. Like, I feel like there's just more tactile sounds with the metal and everything. Did the bowl with the fruit or the produce
Yeah.
fall off a counter or something?
Well, we kind of zoomed in past it before we could see, but I assume with it, as many people and things as zoomed across that counter, it was knocked off eventually. We just didn't get that angle again.
Okay.
But it would have been really funny if they had, like, one of them had set up and had like a melon squished on them. Just saying,
Yeah.
old school cartoon moment right there.
Yeah.
As much as I loved these aliens and how they were portrayed, I felt like I looked at them and I just went, oh, it's not forehead of the week, it's cheek of the week. And I did not care for this makeup. It looked glued on. And that just kind of threw me sometimes, because I feel like it could have been just slightly different, slightly more, slightly less, slightly more blended, something. And it would not have pulled me away, which it did occasionally.
Mm.
I also have a bone to pick about whoever decided where the commercials are in this episode, because I watch it commercial and ad free now. Thank you, Paramount Plus. I appreciate that. But you can still tell this was made for broadcast television. And
Mhm.
the commercial cuts, besides the first one before the opening credits with the cold open, feel really awkward this time. Like, it feels like they cut too soon or they go too long. Every time I was just noticing them, as opposed to where I usually just kind of flow from one to the other. I
Mm.
was thinking, oh man, that was a commercial cut every single time. So not a huge thing, but just unusual for Enterprise, especially in such a balanced episode. And then the one thing that I do have to say, and I've been thinking about this one since I rewatched it the first time for this ending feels like they ran out of time for the last page, maybe 2 pages. Like, I just feel I want 1 or 2 more scenes or 1 more conversation, because we have the whole, they save the day, they're out of the nebula, everybody starts coming out. Archer's talking to the aliens and he's like, yeah, where are you going? They're like, oh, we're going here. And he's like, good luck, bye. And then T'Pol comes out and goes, that's everyone. They shut the door, they walk down the hallway, they both turn different directions. We see the butts of the 2 ensigns down the hall walking away. Like, for such a good episode, I feel like I wanted 1 more something at the end, and I don't even know what it is. Like, a lot of times I can think, oh, I wish I would have had this or that, and I can't tell you what's missing. I just feel like it just ended. Like somebody ripped out my epilogue, maybe.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't feel that way.
Hmm.
But there, I was really fascinated with just the mechanics of the ship and the design, that they're climbing up and down a ladder up the nacelle strut, right?
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Like, we've never seen that. Even
Yeah.
when we go to the nacelle control room on Next Generation, like on Enterprise, all of that, all the machines, all the supplies, the whole crew, Porthos, had to be carried up ladders.
Yeah.
And I love how the ship was dark still, right? And still kind of in shutdown mode. So I found, I don't know, I just had such a great time. Was that your last decon?
That was my last one. It just, and maybe it's because it's such a good episode, I wanted 1 more thing, I
Mm.
just kind of feel like it ended with like a sigh as opposed to like an exclamation point or even a period.
A sigh of relief, though. Like, oh, we got
Well,
through that.
yes, a shower. Yes.
Yeah. That's why no one wants to talk because they all stink.
Well, come on. They could at least brush their teeth.
Yeah. DePaul's like, my nose suppression,
Oh.
is gone. Like, I need to get away from you, Archer. No time for a quip button. No, I don't have a single decon. Like I'm thinking,
Oh,
and I'm like, I have none. Like it was a super balanced episode, balanced with character, with action, with tension, with set design. Like that ship, those sets, like
yeah.
amazing the way they're lit.
Yeah.
Dark and moody, but also so tactile and just an engineering set with you can just move the things around and injectors, all that stuff. So I have no decons at all. First time.
We need a sound effect for that too. Fireworks or something.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was I get okay. Here's my decon. There's no real like major Star Trek moment, right?
There you go.
Besides, to Paul, they're more than a name. But that's kind of not really. That's just character stuff. But and you could be, these deserters, that's a little commentary that could have been a feature of a whole Star Trek episode, right? That kind of
Yeah.
commentary. But yeah, there's not a really rich moral or ethical thing going on here. But that's okay. It didn't bother me. I think because it was such a well-told story that I didn't have any real decons.
Well, that's kind of awesome. So I guess that means we got time for a couple more positives.
So yeah, let's talk one more positive pick for each other. These are our Porthos picks. If our picks were mentioned already in the discussion, we will expand a bit more here. And if they weren't, then we have just a few more things to talk about. So, Abby, I want to hear what is your Porthos pick. What have you been saving till now? Because your picks so far have been really, really great.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel the same way. Um, Mine for this one is I really appreciated that there was actual Porthos in this. Like that sounds silly, but a lot of times when you have shows like this and they're talking about everyone has to take shelter, they don't think about the things like people's pets and the medical supplies and the perishable food and all that. And I appreciate that they were thinking about the picture of the crew again as a whole, all the things that they would want to have with them, all of the creatures. And I like that they keep mentioning Porthos. Like they said, one quadruped is here. And then later on, he's sleeping with Archer. Like he's continually there. And we see
Mhm.
Flots with his menagerie throughout. So, like, I appreciate that they realized that, the humans, Vulcans, and Genobulans were not the only living things on the ship. And they made that practical connection because this whole episode feels so practical. I mean, just we were talking about ladders, and when they were putting supplies up and down the ladders, they're having a bucket brigade pretty much. That's it's just one more layer of Enterprise has that realism. And I
Yes.
really like the fact, I mean, and Porthos walks out with them at the end. He's
Mhm.
there the whole time because he is important to Archer and he's important to the crew and he's really, really adorable. So you know what? I had a reason to pick Porthos this time that really was a good reason. So Porthos is my Porthos pick this time.
That brings our Porthos picks for the season up to 5 times he's been picked as a pro or a Porthos pick. That's pretty
Hey,
good.
that's awesome.
That is really
Well,
good.
especially considering he's not on every episode.
He did have his own episode that we
True.
made our own Porthos picks for. But yeah,
Very true.
thank you for calling
Still.
it out. And I love that scene where, they're in the makeshift bridge and there's Porthos there.
Yep.
And you're right. All the times, when the Enterprise is under attack and who's taking care of Spot?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that they actually kind of touch on that at the end of Generations. Like,
Yep.
but what was Spot doing during that whole time? That,
Yeah.
so Porthos being featured here and taken care of was really good. And again, adds to the realism of Enterprise, like you said.
It's one more layer of making our crew feel like real people.
Exactly.
So I'm throwing it back to you then, Chris. What's your Porthos pick for this episode that had not even barely a decon for you?
This is a huge pick because it is all the scenes in which Archer checks on the crew.
Oh, I'm so glad you picked this.
I just love it. I reveled in those moments. I could watch that part of the episode over and over again because it's just delightful. You just want the crew to be a crew and like each other. And when he, picks up that woman's pad and has a little exchange with her, she's playing a crossword puzzle or something, right?
Yep.
And we get, what is it? The first Vulcan ambassador to Earth is Sokar,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's cool. He chats with Trip about aliens and the camping at the canyon, right? Going back to your camping connection. He checks in on Phlox, and we learn that there's 12 billion people sharing one continent on Denobula.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, nuts. But you get this insight because they have these huge families. Are they all living together, and therefore space would be at a premium in their houses anyway? And
True.
yet they're all so joyful, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting thing we learned about that species. Just dropped in here naturally. I love Archer watching water polo while T'Pol tries to work. It made me think about Data reviewing his files while Picard tries to sleep on a shelf.
Yeah, tries to sleep.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, all these great things and all these great moments. And then T'Pol's pushing buttons loudly. And the back and forth, am I disturbing you? Only slightly. That great little moments of comedy, classic Star Trek comedy that you would get between Kirk and Spock. Like you would get in any series, there's two characters that could have this exact exchange and it work. It's just a classic Star Trek moment. It's not the Star Trek moment, but I loved when Archer compares this to a camping trip. And like you said, perhaps we can sing a few songs later. It's a great line. Perfect. And you've already called this out as a pick, but the end of this whole sequence of Archer connecting with all the members of his crew ends in my mind when he talks about T'Pol needing to fraternize and know the crew more than just their names. So that's my Porthos pick. It is the crew bonding with their captain.
Oh, that's a beautiful pick. And again, this is the season where you see Archer really coming into his own. He was new and fresh and naive and all those things that people said at the beginning, but he's past that now and he's settled and he's in this not great situation, but he's just oozing authority and approachability and charisma. Like this is him as the performing captain as opposed to the diplomat captain or the fighting captain or any of that. And it's not something we get to see that often with him. We see it a lot more with Picard or even Pike or Burnham, but it's so nice to see him doing that, and it's genuine. And like every time you hear anyone talk about Scott Bakula, that's what you hear them say. He is the most genuinely kind, charismatic, open-hearted person, and you see that in his portrayal of Archer in this sequence, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, you mentioned Picard because for Picard, he would do something like this if they're about to die. They're about to go into war. He'll walk the ship.
Yep.
And Janeway, I think she walks the ship in parallax, I think. Just getting to know the crew. That's a good thing. That's a similar moment. But the crew's all not in this tight space like they are here. There's an intimacy with this walking around. And you can see Archer just enjoying having all of his people in one place.
Yeah.
And, another thing you said, like season 1, he's just finding his footing. We get a lot of scenes with him connecting with his crew, but it's only in his dining room, right, with a few people at a time. But in like Marauders, we see him grown to the point where he's giving advice from one leader to another. So he is really coming into his leadership. And this is just another flavor of that, another dimension of his leadership. It's that personability.
Absolutely.
Accessing library computer data.
So here on First Flight, we love trivia and behind the scenes tidbits, and we pick a few to share about each episode. So I'm going to start tonight, and I don't think anyone is going to be surprised that I'm talking Chef, because this is the only time in the entire series run of Enterprise that Chef appears on screen, and only from the waist down with no lines. But it's part of this wonderful running joke that he's never seen despite being mentioned all the time. And part of this reason for eluding him has always been credited to respect for food stylist Dorothy Duder, who made all the show's food props and was therefore considered the real chef, with quotes around real. And the chef, this is even funnier, was played by frequent Star Trek stand-in Richard Stardsett, I hope I said that right, who coincidentally was a stand-in for Jonathan Frakes on TNG. And then later in Enterprise, and These Are the Voyages, Frakes' character Riker plays the chef in a holodeck program. So like it's this big circle of Trekdom and food and chef, and it's just a beautiful little piece of trivia right there.
Oh my goodness, I love that Frakes becomes the stand-in for the stand-in at the end of the series.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Oh man, that's good. That's pretty good.
All right, so what do you have for us tonight, Chris?
Well, I have two shorter ones. The first one is that the concept for this episode originated from a magazine article that Mike Sussman read about radiation dangers faced by astronauts on future missions to Mars. And I just love when like the writers are reading current science and that's informing their stories. I mean, it should be, right? Because Star Trek is not just like loosely based on science fiction like a Star Wars will be. Star Wars is like science fantasy. But Star Trek is trying, like I said earlier, like the crews are going out to learn, right?
Yeah.
It's an educational mission. And so I love that the stories are growing out of our writers pursuing knowledge about the current understandings about space travel. So Sussman says, it seemed to me that the crew of Enterprise would be vulnerable to something like an ion storm. And there might be some kind of radiation-proof chamber they could evacuate to. So I love that little seed of the story coming out of, Mike Sussman just flipping pages in a magazine.
It is really cool, and it's always interesting what inspires people. I always like to hear those origin stories of ideas.
So yes, me too. So I have a second one, and I alluded to it early on, but this is a neutronic storm was previously encountered in Voyager's Fairhaven and referenced in Voyager's Live Fast and Prosper. And of course, if I can call out Voyager, I will. And Fairhaven is a great episode that is about a fierce, vulnerable Catherine Janeway, not Captain Janeway, but Catherine Janeway, and that's why I love it. So anyway, I like those neutronic storm connections. Although I think in Voyager it's blue, and here it's kind of purple, right?
Yeah, but it's like a glow stick. Depends on what's inside it, right?
This is an alpha quadrant storm, and delta quadrant ones are blue, so it's okay.
There you go. It's color coded, like Parcheesi, right?
Yeah. Well, it's time to come to our Grappler ratings and our final thoughts. So, out of 10 Grappler ratings, How do you rate this episode, Abby?
All right, so obviously we both liked this one. It's fun. Every time I had to rewatch it, I felt better when I was done. Like it just kind of leaves you with that good feeling. It's got all of our regulars doing something. Everybody has an important part. Everybody has a moment. There's great pacing. There's great visuals. There's great music. There's great character development.
Mm.
I just wish there had been like one more little thing to tie it up for me, and so this one gets a 9 out of 10 grapplers for me, and that is high praise.
That is high praise. Wow.
Yeah. I really like this one. I would watch it again, and I've just watched it 4 times in the past 3 days.
Abby, this is your highest of the season.
So far, yeah.
So far, yeah. Well, this is like I said, I think it's a really balanced episode. Strong character in the first half, strong editing and pacing and action, and the sets and VFX in the second half. No decons, except there's not a strong ethic, moral message going on. So with that said, it's an 8.5 for me. Because it lacks that strong moral, ethical message that I really go to Star Trek for a lot. Which this is my highest episode of the season 2, tied with Shockwave Part 2.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. It's doing a good job for both of us.
It is. And, I was noticing when I was looking at all my little thumbnails going down that this is the second of 4 thumbnails in a row that feature Trip. So I'm just going to kind of come back to that in the next couple that we recorded this and see if I feel like that was the valid. Are we in the Trip Tucker phase of season 2 right now?
Well, the thumbnail for our episode art is Trip in the environmental suit, whatever they call it in Enterprise.
Yeah. Those are so pretty.
They are. I just had to feature it because they're awesome.
It's one of my favorite costumes of all time on all Star Trek, and my favorite EV suit of any series, any movie, anything. They are just gorgeous.
I mean, I really love the First Contact ones, the white, they're pristine, they're really cool.
Yeah.
But these are tactile and really neat.
Yes.
Yeah, so
and they've got the great patches, and they're that beautiful copper color, and All right, so maybe there's another Porthos pick right there for me, but those are always my Porthos pick when they're on screen, so I feel like I can't just say that every time.
Yeah. You chose Porthos. That's great.
Absolutely.
Do they have one of those for Porthos?
I would hope so.
You would seem they would have to.
Huh. And what happens to the Pyrithian bat?
Oh no.
We've got things to think about.
Well, they just get like a floating case, I guess. So maybe Porthos does too. Or oh well. Okay.
All right. After that tangent, why don't we get back on track? Run us through a recap of your pros and your Porthos, Chris.
So my pros. Number 1, the neutronic wave is beautiful. And this is about all the visual effects are gorgeous and compelling and engaging and dynamic in this episode, with the ship shots, the pulling out of the window with Trip, and that neutronic wavefront is just stunning. Number 2, Travis's backstory as Trip and Travis are walking through, dealing with all the logistics of all the engineering they're going to have to do in the catwalk. And then we have that final sequence of action cutting between all the different locations on the ship, from the makeshift command space, the bridge, the firefight in the kitchen, to Paul and Reed working, the bridge with the aliens with the awesome voice, and the visual effects, just wonderfully cut together. And then my Porthos pick is just that whole sequence of Archer checking in and connecting with his crew. What about yours, Abby?
Oh, first of all, when you say them like that, that's a gorgeous list, just to say.
Thank you.
All
It's
right.
a gorgeous
so my
episode.
number one, it is a gorgeous episode. It's a nice breather in this season too. So my pros here, my number one was the whole Travis and Trip planning out how the catwalk is going to work and all the practical details there. My number two was the alien captain, played by Danny Goldring, and just how awesome and how evil and how wonderfully chilling he was. My number three was to Paul's growing relationships with the crew and how we got to see that featured with multiple different people throughout. And my Porthos pick was actually seeing Porthos throughout and making the point that they were really thinking about the practicality of this situation long term while they were planning out this episode, and that nice attention to detail that it brings.
Another great list.
Captain, I'm detecting a vessel closing on our position.
Columbia to Enterprise.
Well, that sound means that we have an incoming transmission from our friend Melanie, all the way from the NX-02 Columbia.
Greetings, Enterprise fans and First Flight crew. This is Melanie transmitting from the NX-02 Columbia with my thoughts on the Catwalk. I can also be found on Instagram at shuttlepod.two. I've always really enjoyed the Catwalk, and I think it's one of the better episodes of Season 2. Actually, it kicks off a really excellent section of the season. The stakes are really high, and once again we see this outstanding crew coming together, doing great teamwork, and once again working together to prepare for this time in the Catwalk with very, very short notice, preparing the living quarters, as well as the technical aspects of rerouting and running the ship from there. I realize it's really difficult to be in such close quarters and tensions are running high, but come on, Malcolm, give Trip a break. Malcolm's complaining about everything. I do think this episode combines really serious subject matter, high stakes, with some humor thrown in here every now and then, which is a nice balance. Great scene with Phlox and T'Pol talking about the cubic meters for storing his animals. And my backup for favorite part has to be Archer walking around, bonding with people, checking in with people, being the wonderful Archer that he is, interacting with that crew person about the crossword puzzle and all of that. I really enjoyed that. I also really liked Travis's look of pride when Archer praised him at the end. And of course we got to see Chef's legs and feet. My Porthos's pick is Archer saying, "You're in my chair." This is a strong and solid and entertaining episode of Season 2. It kind of has it all. Has a tight script, action, tension, bad guys, really good story, keeps you engaged, more character development for T'Pol with her socialization with the others, a great ending. I really enjoy this one, and I kept debating between an 8.5 and a 9. I was going to give it 8.75, but you know what? After watching it again, for today, I'm giving the Catwalk 9 out of 10 grapplers. And until next time, my friends, take care and live long and prosper. Columbia out.
My chronometer's running backwards, sir.
Incoming transmission.
You read my letter?
We want to remind you that we adore getting feedback and thoughts from listeners, and we hope you could tell that from our last mailbag episode, which was so much fun. We shared and discussed your insights and ideas, and we laughed, and it was glorious. So we have had lots of chats on social media with so many of you, and we're collecting again for the next mailbag episode. So this is your call this episode for any Grappler ratings, Porthos picks, general comments. Please get them to us so you can be part of our mailbag episode fun. And here's my question of the episode here. What do you think happens to all the animals if everybody else needs EV suits? There you go. And run with it.
And I'm adding something new here too. Okay, we haven't talked about it. but when you give us feedback, it would be awesome if you could use the hashtag Carrot Crew. Because that, when we were searching for feedback for our last mailbag, it would have been easier if we had a hashtag to search. And I feel like Carrot Crew is the perfect hashtag for our audience to use. So join the Carrot Crew, give us some feedback.
I am 1,000,000,000% behind that. That's my favorite part of today right now is go Carrot Crew. That's going on the t-shirt.
Totally. So yes, please do reach out to us and share your thoughts or smiles that you have for us using the hashtag Carrot Crew. I'm typing this in our script, so it'll be in our future episodes now. A little behind the scenes. You can reach us at First Flight Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're also on YouTube under the Tricorder Transmissions Network. You can reach me personally at Shelf Nerds or on my YouTube channel, Completing the Shelf, where I talk a lot about Star Trek, especially Voyager. Abby, what's the best place to find you?
Best place to reach me still is Twitter, and I'm at Abby M. Summer. That's SOMMER.
We want to thank you for spending this time with us. We'll be back next time with Dawn, the 13th episode of Season 2, halfway through. And as always, we leave you with this quote from Captain Jonathan Archer and your moment of Melanie.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us, all of us, to each other.
Hey.
Woohoo, we did it.
Yeah, sometime I tagged, no, maybe I was talking with Peter and I said hashtag Carrot Crew or I said welcome to the Carrot Crew or something.
I think you said you're definitely part of the Carrot Crew because he was talking about how he didn't realize he had inadvertently started off an entire new chain of Carrot Ball discussion 3 months after.
Yes.
Thank you, Peter. We love you, Peter.
Yes, we do. The Carrot Crew.
Seriously, we need t-shirts.
Yes.
Nobody would get it, but that's the best part. Only the special people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.